The candle upon the mantel had burned low, its flame guttering against the cruel draught that crept beneath the library door, when the cry shattered the warmth of Lady Hartwell's ballroom. "She has been found! Alone! With him!" In that instant, the orchestra's bows fell still upon their strings, the dancers froze mid-turn, and every countenance in that glittering assembly turned as one toward the library threshold, where Miss Imogen Calloway stood trembling, her ivory gown disordered at the shoulder, her dark curls fallen loose from their pins, and her eyes wide with a horror no one in that gilded room troubled themselves to comprehend. She was ruined. The word required no utterance. It hung thick in the candle smoke and perfume of that ballroom, like a shroud already fitted to her shoulders, a shroud she had never consented to wear. All around her, silk gowns rustled as their wearers drew back, as though impropriety itself might be caught like a fever on the night air. The chandeliers blazed on, indifferent and bright, while a cold draught slipped beneath the library door and curled about Imogen's ankles, the only honest thing left in that room of painted smiles. Behind her, in the shadow of the doorway, Mr. Edmund Falk straightened his cravat with the satisfied calm of a man whose scheme had succeeded admirably. Only an hour before, Imogen Calloway was merely an orphaned baronet's daughter, modest in fortune, but cherished by those few who knew her for her gentle wit and her unwavering integrity. Her only transgression, if it could be called such, had been her steadfast refusal of Mr. Falk's ardent and repeated proposals of marriage. He had pursued her fortuneless hand with a persistence that ought to have flattered her. Instead, it had unsettled her, for there was something in his smile that never quite reached his eyes. "You will regret this refusal, Miss Calloway," he had warned her only a fortnight past, in a voice silk-soft and edged with menace. "Women who refuse advantageous offers so often find themselves with none at all." She had not understood then how far his vanity might carry him, how a man scorned might choose ruin over rejection so long as the ruin was not his own. Imogen's aunt, the widowed Mrs. Pruitt, who had raised her since childhood, whispered fiercely as the scandal unfurled around them, clutching a niece's arm with fingers gone white as bone. "Imogen, what madness possessed you to enter that library unchaperoned?" "I did not enter it willingly, aunt. He drew me in under pretense of returning my fan. I swear it upon my mother's memory." But in the ballrooms of the ton, sworn truths counted for little against the appetite for scandal. Already the matrons turned their fans in silent judgment. Already the whispers multiplied like sparks upon dry kindling. And already Imogen understood, with a coldness that settled into her very bones, that her good name, the only inheritance her late father had left her, was being stripped from her before the candles had even guttered out. In the farthest corner of that ballroom, where the candlelight scarcely reached, stood a man who had witnessed the entire wretched affair, Alaric Thorne, Duke of Renfield. Society called him the Marble Duke, for in the 2 years since he had buried his young wife and infant son to a fever no physician could name, he had not been observed to smile, nor weep, nor offer more than the barest civility his rank required. He attended balls because duty demanded it, stood near windows because solitude suited him, and spoke, when he spoke at all, in sentences too brief to invite further conversation. But the Duke had been standing nearer to the library than any soul in that ballroom suspected, his countenance hidden by the deep shadow of a velvet curtain, a volume of poetry forgotten in his gloved hand. He had seen Mr. Falk corner Miss Calloway against the cold stone hearth. He had heard her struggle, heard her sharp refusal, watched Falk seize her wrist with a force no gentleman ought ever to employ, and then Falk fling wide the library doors the very moment voices approached, arranging her dishevelled appearance as deliberately as a man dresses a stage for performance. He said nothing that night. It was not yet his moment to speak, but something cold and dormant within his chest had stirred at last, a fury he had thought buried alongside his grief. In the days that followed, Imogen learned the full bitterness of ruin. Invitations that once arrived by the dozen ceased entirely. Her aunt's drawing room, once filled with callers and laughter, grew silent like a tomb, the only sound the mournful ticking of the mantel clock and the anxious rustle of Mrs. Pruitt's needlework. Even old acquaintances crossed the street rather than acknowledge her, their countenances arranged into expressions of practiced pity or thinly veiled contempt. "They have decided who I am," Imogen confessed one evening, her voice raw, staring into a fire that gave no warmth to match the chill settling over her future, asking herself the question that haunted every ruined woman before her. How does one prove an absence of sin when the world has already convicted you of it? The opportunity for justice arrived unlooked for at the assembly rooms a fortnight later, an event Imogen had been all but forbidden to attend, were it not for her aunt's stubborn insistence that hiding would only confirm society's cruel verdict. As Imogen entered, in a gown of deep blue silk that rustled softly with each reluctant step, the room's bright chatter dimmed to a hostile murmur. Mr. Falk, emboldened by his earlier success, approached with a smile dripping false sympathy.
"Miss Calloway, how brave of you to show your countenance here, given the circumstances." "The only circumstance I regret, sir," Imogen replied, her voice trembling yet unbroken, "is ever having believed your character to be honorable." A ripple of scandalized gasps moved through the assembly, until a voice, deep and commanding, cut through the room like a blade through silk. "She speaks the truth." Every head turned. The Duke of Renfield had stepped from the shadows of the far wall, his expression carved from the same cold stone society had long accused him of possessing, save that now his eyes burned with something fierce and unmistakably alive. "I beg your pardon, Your Grace," Falk's composure faltered for the first time. "I was present in Lady Hartwell's library that night. I witnessed you corner Miss Calloway against her will. I witnessed her resist your advances, and I witnessed you arrange her appearance and fling open those doors the instant you heard approaching footsteps. A calculated cruelty, sir, designed to force a lady's hand through ruin when seduction itself had failed you." The silence that followed was absolute. Falk's countenance drained of all color. "This is preposterous slander, Your Grace." "It is testimony," the Duke replied evenly, "and I shall repeat it before any magistrate, any drawing-room, any soul in England who requires convincing. Miss Calloway's honor was never in question. Yours, sir, was never present to begin with." Imogen stood, frozen, scarcely daring to breathe as 2 years of icy reserve melted from the Duke's countenance entirely. He turned to her, and when he spoke again, his voice had softened into something achingly tender. "I have watched you these many months, Miss Calloway, and told myself my admiration was merely indifference. I see now it was cowardice. A fear of feeling anything at all after loss had taught me that feeling brought only ruin. I will not let fear silence me a second time. Will you permit me, before all assembled here, to make plain my regard for you?" Imogen's breath caught, tears gathering unbidding, as the weight of weeks, months of quiet despair finally found release. "Your Grace, I scarcely know how to answer such a declaration." "Then answer only this," he said, drawing nearer, heedless of the 100 eyes upon them. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not to silence scandal, though it shall certainly accomplish that, but because I find myself, against every careful instinct I possess, ardently and irrevocably in love with you." The room that had condemned her now held its breath in collective wonder. "Yes, Your Grace," whispered Imogen, then again stronger, as though testing the truth of her own joy. "Yes, Your Grace, with all my heart." Mr. Fawke fled the assembly rooms that very night, his reputation, ironically, the only one truly ruined by morning's light, while word of the Duke's passionate defense spread through town faster than the scandal itself had ever traveled. By spring, the manor that had once felt to Imogen like exile became instead a home filled with warmth, laughter, and the particular tenderness of a man who had finally allowed himself to feel again. The coldest duke in England had thawed before all society's astonished eyes, not for duty, not for appearances, but for love freely and ardently given. And Imogen Calloway, once branded a ruined woman, became instead the woman who taught a grieving heart how to hope once more.